He had been running for 6 years, from a warrant that lied about him, from a name that had been turned into something shameful, from the memory of a wife and daughter he couldn't save because he was too busy hiding. He had stopped believing he deserved a home, stopped believing he had anything left to ride toward. And then a blizzard threw him off his horse onto a widow's doorstep, and 5 children who had every reason to turn him away chose, one by one, in their own time and their own way, to let him stay. On this channel, we tell the stories the West was really built on, not legends, but people. Broken, grieving, stubborn, loving people who found each other at exactly the right moment of falling apart and chose to hold on. What this story leaves with you: home is not a place you're born into. It's a place someone chooses to pull you toward, and a place you finally choose to stop running from. Subscribe if this story found you at the right moment. Drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and come back. Because every story here is worth the ride. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. Thank you for being part of our community.
Josie cut the leather stirrup with a knife she kept on the porch. The man fell and did not move. His coat was torn clean open and the blood had soaked through and frozen to him in dark sheets. The horse just stumbled toward the barn, running on memory alone. "Mama!" Hattie stood in the doorway, all of 13 years old, with a kitchen knife in her hand. "Mama, what are we going to do?" "Get your brother." "Which one?" "Ezra. Now." And she was gone. Josie knelt and pressed 2 fingers to the stranger's throat. The pulse was weak, but it was there. She pulled his collar back and saw a dark beard, silver at the jaw, and a deep gash over his eye that was already swelling shut. "Mister," she said, shaking his shoulder. "Can you hear me?" His lips moved. She leaned close. "The horse," he whispered. "Do not let the horse die. She is all I got." Josie sat back on her heels. A man half dead, and his first words were for his horse. Her Robert Bellamy would have said the exact same fool thing. "Mama, I am not helping you bring a stranger inside." Ezra stood there, only 11, with his father's hunting knife in his belt, like a man twice his age. "Papa said—" "Your papa said a lot of things, Ezra. He also said a Bellamy does not let nothing die on their doorstep if they can help it. This is different." "How?" "Because Papa is not here to protect us if this man turns out wrong." The words hit her hard, not because they were disrespectful, but because they were true. She looked at her son, jaw set tight, seeing all the nights he had laid awake since Robert died, trying to be the man of the house. "Ezra James Bellamy," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I have a rifle. You have a knife. Your sister has the shotgun shells counted by the back door. We are not helpless. Now grab his arm before he freezes solid." Ezra grabbed the man's arm without another word, but his hand never left that knife. They dragged him inside by the fireplace. Josie bolted the door and turned to find her children ready for a battle. Hattie stood between the stranger and the little ones. Clementine, 8 years old and silent since the funeral, just watched with those big dark eyes. And Bertie wailed from the crib, each cry weaker than the last, her little body burning up with a 3-day fever. "He is bleeding bad, Mama," Hattie said, nodding toward the man's side. Josie peeled back his coat. The gash ran from his lower ribs to his hip, deep enough to show muscle. She had stitched leather and canvas before. She had even stitched Robert's arm once while he told her she had steadier hands than any doctor. "I need the sewing kit," she said, "the good needle, and boil thread in the kettle." "You are going to stitch him?" Ezra asked. "Not unless you want him bleeding out on the floor your papa built." She cleaned the wound with whiskey from a bottle Robert kept for emergencies, one she had never opened till tonight. The stranger woke with a sharp breath, his hand shooting out and grabbing her wrist. Strong grip. Then he saw her face and let go like he'd touched a hot stove. "Easy," Josie said. "I am not going to hurt you." "Sorry, ma'am," he rasped. "Where am I?" "Bellamy Homestead. Your horse dragged you here." "She found you," he said, and a hint of a smile touched his lips. "Good girl. She a smart horse. You got a name to go with her?" "Silas. Silas Thorne." "Well, Silas Thorne, I am about to push a needle through your skin. I would appreciate it if you did not grab me again." "Yes, ma'am." He took 19 stitches and did not make a sound, just stared at the ceiling with his jaw locked tight. This man took pain quiet, like it was something he had practiced. "Not my prettiest work," she said, tying off the thread, "but it will hold." "It is good work," he said, turning to look. "Better than most field." He stopped himself. Josie caught it. "Better than most what?" "Nothing, ma'am. Just grateful." From the crib, Bertie coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made the whole cabin go still. Josie was on her feet in an instant, holding her daughter, feeling the heat pour off that tiny body. 3 days, Hattie said quietly. "Fever will not come down." "Dr. Finch?" Josie asked, though she knew the answer. "Drunk, could not even get on his horse." Josie held Bertie closer. The baby's breathing sounded like tearing paper. She had heard that sound before, the night her mother-in-law died while the snow piled up outside. "How old?" the stranger asked from the floor. "Do not concern yourself," Josie said. "Ma'am, how old is that child?" "3. She is 3. Silas closed his eyes. When he opened them, the look on his face had changed. All the pain was gone, replaced by a sharp urgency. "Lift her up. Let me see her breathe." "You do not get to tell me." "Her lungs are filling up," his voice cut like a knife. "I can hear the rattle from here. If you do not clear it tonight, by morning, she will not be able to draw a breath." Josie stared at him. "How do you know that?" "Because I've heard it before, in men and in children. I know what it sounds like when someone is drowning from the inside out." "Who are you?" He held her gaze. "Right now, I am someone who can help your daughter. That is all that matters." Ezra stepped forward, planting himself between Silas and the crib. "Mama, do not. We do not know this man. Papa trusted a man, and that man got him killed. I'm not trusting nobody just because they talk pretty and look hurt." Silas looked right at the boy. "You are right," he said, his voice calm. "You have got every reason not to trust me. Your daddy taught you to protect this family, and that is what you are doing." He paused. "But I'm asking you to weigh that against what you are hearing from that crib. Listen to your sister breathe. Really listen. Then you decide." The cabin went quiet, except for Bertie's ragged breathing. That terrible wet rattle was getting closer together now. Ezra listened, his hand so tight on his knife his knuckles went white. "Tell me what to do," the boy said, "but I swear to God, if you hurt her—" "If I hurt her," Silas finished for him, "you can use that knife. Fair deal." Fair deal. And just like that, they all went to work. Silas gave directions from the floor, his voice steady and sure. Hattie boiled water in every pot they owned. Ezra, clever with his hands, rigged blankets over the crib. Josie crushed dried mint and sage, filling the air with a sharp, clean smell. "More steam," Silas ordered. "Keep it thick. She needs to breathe nothing but wet heat for the next hour." "She's so little," Hattie whispered, her hands shaking as she fixed the blanket. "Just too little for this world." Silas spoke up, his voice steady. "Small is not the same as weak. I have seen babies pull through sickness that would take down a full-grown man. They survive because nobody ever told them they are supposed to die." Right then, Clementine was just there beside Josie, quiet as a shadow. She held out a little bunch of dried wild thyme tied up with string. Josie whispered her name. "Clennam." wondering where she found it. The little girl just pointed to a loose floorboard in the pantry. It was her mama's secret spot for her best herbs, the ones for real trouble. Josie's throat got tight. That is a good girl. She put the thyme in the steam, and the smell got richer. Bertie's next breath sounded a little less ragged. It was not much, but it was something. Silas then said to get some warm honey with a bit of mint water, just a little at a time to calm her throat. Hattie's face fell. We are almost out of honey, maybe a quarter jar left. Use it all, he said, but that is the last of it. Silas looked straight at Hattie. You can find more honey. You cannot find another sister. Hattie snatched the jar and got to work. They fought for her all through the night. Josie carefully spooned the sweet water past Bertie's dry lips. Hattie held the tiny girl up so she would not choke. Ezra fed the fire, keeping the room so warm that sweat ran down the walls. Sam had drifted off to sleep on the floor, his head resting on the stranger's arm with a trust only a child can have. And Clementine, she sat by the crib, as silent as a stone. Her hand slipped under the blanket to rest on Bertie's little foot. It was the only comfort she knew how to give. Twice, Bertie just stopped breathing. The first time was for 3 seconds that felt like a lifetime. Josie's own heart stopped right along with her baby's. Silas's voice cut through the fear, calm and quick. Turn her on her side. Josie did it without even thinking. Bertie coughed, gasped, and then let out a cry. It was the most wonderful sound Josie had ever heard. The second time was close to 3 in the morning. It lasted longer. 5 seconds. 6. Josie froze, holding her daughter, praying to a god she had been mad at for 2 long years. Pat her back, Silas said, right between the shoulders. Do it firm, but I will hurt her. You will save her. Do it now, Josie, he said her name. The first time, it was not until later she realized it. She patted Bertie's back, hard, like he said. The little baby shuddered and coughed up something awful, then took a huge gulp of air. Josie let out one single ragged sob she could not hold back. Then she wiped her eyes and went back to work. The sun came up slow and gray. Bertie was breathing steady. Her fever was down. She was sleeping on Josie's chest, her tiny hand tangled in her mama's hair. Silas had finally passed out around 4, his face pale as a sheet. His wound had started bleeding again because he had spent the night giving orders from the floor instead of resting. Josie just looked at him. This man who told her to use the last of their honey, who knew what to do for a choking baby, who had called her by her name and made her move when she was frozen with fear. Mama? Hattie was beside her, looking worn out. Who is he? How did he know all that? I do not know yet. Are you going to ask him when he wakes up? Yes. Hattie was quiet for a bit. He saved her, Mama. Whatever else he might be, he saved our Bertie. I know. So, what are we going to do with him? Josie looked from her daughter to the stranger on her floor, then toward the windows where the storm still howled. We wait, we watch, and we keep the rifle handy. A while later, Ezra was the only one still awake. He stood over the stranger's saddlebags, which Hattie had brought inside earlier. He had been eyeing those bags all night long, suspicious of everything. He opened the first one, just clothes, bullets, and some coffee. He started on the second one. His fingers found a piece of folded paper. It felt thick, official. He unfolded it by the lamplight. There were big black letters printed over a drawing of a man's face. It was the same face sleeping just a few feet away on his mama's floor. Wanted. Silas Thorne, for desertion and cowardice. A $500 reward by order of the United States Army. Ezra's hand went to his own knife. His breath came short and fast. He looked at his mama holding Bertie, then at Sam curled up against the wanted man. He folded the paper, stuck it in his pocket, and sat down by the door. He put his knife on his knees and waited for the stranger to open his eyes. Silas woke up feeling like someone was staring holes through him. He opened his eyes and saw Ezra Bellamy sitting there with a knife and a look that was pure danger. "Morning," Silas said. Ezra did not even blink. "You wake up slow. That is good. Means you are hurt bad. Means I can get to my mama before you can get to anyone else." Silas looked the boy over. You are a smart one. Your papa teach you to think like that? Do not talk about my papa. About, all right, I found something in your bags. Those words hit Silas harder than a punch. He knew what the boy had found. He had carried that poster for 3 long years. I figured somebody would, Silas said quietly. Desertion and cowardice, Ezra said, his voice low. $500. That is more money than my papa made in 2 whole years of cutting timber. It is. So you are a coward, a man who ran from a fight. That is what the paper says. And you came into our house. You put your hands on my baby sister. You told my mama what to do. And she listened because she was scared and you acted like you knew it all. Ezra's jaw was set hard. What kind of man does that? Sneaking into a family's home pretending he is a good man when he has got that in his bag? Silas pushed himself up to lean against the fireplace. The stitches in his side screamed in protest. The pain was sharp, but the boy's words hurt a whole lot more. Wall, though he kept a straight face. Silas figured the boy deserved a man who could at least sit up straight. The kind who wasn't aiming to be here, Silas said. The kind whose horse found your place in a blizzard. I didn't ask for this, son. But with your sister breathing this morning, I ain't sorry it happened. Don't you call me son. Wouldn't think of it. Ezra pulled a folded paper from his pocket and slowly opened it. Mama's gonna see this, and then you're leaving. Storm or not, stitches or not, you're gone. That's a decision for your mama. Everything in this family is my decision now. The boy's voice cracked just a little on that last word. It was enough to show the fear he was hiding under all that toughness. Someone's got to keep us safe, and it won't be a stranger with a wanted poster and blood on my mama's floor. Ezra, Josie's voice came from the doorway behind him. She stood there holding a sleeping birdie with a look that said she had heard it all and was thinking on it. Ezra held out the poster. Mama, look. Josie walked over and took the paper from his hand. She read it over twice. Silas saw the moment she understood, how her eyes narrowed and her free hand clutched Birdie a little tighter. She took one small step back, putting herself between him and the crib. Desertion, she said. Cowardice in the face of the enemy. Yes, ma'am. Is it true? The desertion part is, I walked away from my unit. Silas met her gaze. The coward part is a lie told by a man who needed someone else to blame. But I can't prove that from your floor with a hole in my side. Then why would I believe you? You shouldn't. Not on my word alone. Words are easy. He nodded toward the back room. But you heard your daughter breathe last night. You heard what I told you to do, and it worked. A coward doesn't learn what I know. A coward runs from folks who are hurting, not to them. Josie was quiet for a long while. You have 2 days, Josie finally said, until this storm passes and you're well enough to ride. You will not touch my children. You will not go through our things. And if I find you've lied about anything, Ezra won't be your biggest worry. I understand, ma'am. I heard you, Ezra, she said to her son, and I'm proud of you for standing guard. But I'm your mother. This is my house, and this is my call to make. Ezra's face changed in an instant. He stood up, put his knife back in his belt, and walked right out into the snow without a coat. He's angry, Silas said. He's been angry for 2 years carrying this family since his daddy died. He's breaking under the weight of it. Josie shifted Birdie on her shoulder. Don't mistake this for trust, Mr. Thorne. You're staying because my baby girl needs what you know. The moment she's better, you are gone. I wouldn't expect nothing less. Hattie put a bowl of oatmeal on the table, then set another one on the floor next to Silas. The message was clear. Thank you, Silas said. Don't thank me. Hattie's eyes looked a decade older than she was. I saw what you did for Birdie, and I'm grateful. But grateful and trusting are 2 different things. I learned that the hard way. From your father? From the man who told my father the login job was safe. Papa believed him, and now Papa's dead. You understand me, Mr. Thorne? Perfectly. The morning went on with a careful quiet. Josie took care of Bertie, and Silas gave her instructions from the floor. More steam. Keep her sitting up. They spoke only when they had to. Sam, who was all of 6 years old, was the one to break the silence. He came up to Silas holding a bowl of melted snow. "For your face," Sam said. "Mama says cuts have to be cleaned." "Sam, you leave him be," Hattie called out. "But his face is all cut up." Silas took the bowl. "Much obliged, Sam. That's mighty thoughtful. Mama says I'm the thoughtful one. Ezra's tough, Hattie's smart, Clem is quiet, and Bertie's little." Sam sat down right there on the floor. "What are you?" "Right now, I'm mostly the injured one." "No, I mean in your family. Everybody's got a thing." Silas dabbed the cold water on his cuts. "I was the oldest. I had a sister named Ruth, 3 years younger. She was the stubborn one." "Where is she?" "Ohio, last I heard." "That's a long way from Montana. Don't you miss her?" "Every day." "Then why don't you go see her?" Silas was quiet. He could hear the whole cabin go still. Everyone was listening. "Because sometimes," Silas said, "a man makes choices that take him so far from home, he can't find his way back." "Well, that's dumb," Sam said. "You just ride a horse. Mama says every road goes 2 ways. "Your mama sounds like a very wise woman." "She's the best mama in Montana. She can shoot a rabbit from 50 yards away." "Sam," Josie said, "go check on the chickens, please." Sam looked like he knew he was being sent away from the important talk. "I'll be back. I got more questions." "I'll be here." "Promise?" The word just hung there in the quiet. Silas saw the warning look in Josie's eyes. "I'll be here when you get back from the chickens," Silas said carefully. "That's all I can say for sure." Sam nodded like it was a fair deal. He went to the door, then stopped. "Mr. Silas, that poster said you ran from the army." "That's right." "Did you run 'cause you were scared?" "No." "Then why'd you run?" "Because staying meant I'd have to watch people die who didn't have to." Sam thought about that with all the seriousness a 6-year-old can have. "That sounds like the opposite of a coward to me." Then he went outside. Josie let out a long breath. She knelt to check on Bertie, close enough for Silas to smell the wood smoke in her hair. "He asks too many questions." "He asks the right ones," Silas said. "Most grown-ups ain't that brave." She looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time. "You said you know what it sounds like when someone's drowning from the inside. That's not something a trapper learns." "No, ma'am. I just need to know one thing. Are my children safe with you in this cabin?" "They're safer with me here than without me. At least till that baby's breathing easy." "That's not what I asked you." "I have never hurt a child in my life," he said, his voice low and true. "And I would die before I let any harm come to yours. That is the truest thing I know how to say." Josie stood up. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say a word, just went back to the kitchen for more hot water. But she left the rifle against the far wall. Silas knew for a woman like Josie Bellamy, that was a sign of trust. By afternoon, bird's fever broke just enough for her to open her eyes and fuss for a meal. The whole cabin settled into a quiet rhythm, learning how to live with a stranger among them. Ezra came inside, his arms full of enough firewood for 2 days. He'd been chopping in the cold all morning without any gloves. His hands were raw and split, and he wouldn't meet anyone's eyes as he dropped the wood. "Thank you, Ezra," Josie said. He just grunted. "Your hands," Silas pointed out. "I've got a salve for that." "Don't need nothing from you." "Suit yourself," Silas replied. "But frostbite doesn't just go away. A family that needs a boy who can fix things can't afford for him to lose his hands." Ezra just clenched his jaw. He stared into the fire for a long moment, then got up and held his hands out to Silas without a single word. Silas checked them over like he had done it 1,000 times before. He gently looked at each finger, testing for color and blood flow. "It's not permanent," he said, "but you need to cover these in tallow tonight and wrap them up tight and wear gloves next time." "Gloves got a hole in 'em," Ezra mumbled. "Well, I can fix that," Hattie called from the kitchen. "If folks would tell me before they go and freeze their hands off." Hattie brought a jar of tallow over. "You show me how to wrap them right, and I'll do it next time." Silas showed her, and she watched like her life depended on it, her hands copying his every move. She asked smart questions that told him she'd been the one holding this family together for a long time. "You're good at this," Silas told her. "I'm good at whatever it takes to keep my family alive," she said, finishing the wrap on Ezra's hand. "Mama can't do it all. I do what needs doing." "That's a heavy load for a 13-year-old. "I don't recall asking your opinion on my load, Mr. Thorne." "No, ma'am, you surely did not." Clementine had been watching the whole time. She was over by the window, quiet as a mouse. Silas was starting to figure out she didn't talk at all. She stood up, walked to the mending shelf, and brought back a pair of leather gloves with a torn thumb. She set them down next to Silas without even looking at him and went right back to her window. "That's the most she's spoken to anyone outside the family in 2 years," Hattie said under her breath. "She stopped talking the day Papa died." Silas picked up the gloves. They were good leather, a father's gloves, brought by a daughter who couldn't speak but still found a way to be heard. "I'll fix these tonight," he said. No one said a thing, but you could feel something in the room had changed. It wasn't trust, not yet, but a door that had been locked and barred was now just closed, and a closed door can be opened. That evening, the wind howled and threw snow against the cabin. Josie put the little ones to bed. Hattie sat in the rocking chair reading her mother's old recipe book. Ezra stood guard by the door, a knife resting on his lap, his eyes fixed on Silas. "You can get some sleep, boy," Silas said. "I'm not going anywhere." "That's what I'm afraid of," Ezra shot back. Josie brought Silas fresh water and bandages. She changed his dressing with the same steady hands she'd used to stitch him up. He could see the deep tiredness in her eyes she tried to hide from her children. "Birdie is breathing easier," she said. "She'll need the steam for at least 3 more days." "Then I suppose I'm not leaving in 2 days," Silas replied. "I suppose not." She finished the bandage. "I lost my husband because he believed a liar. A foreman swore the timber was safe when he knew it wasn't. I don't have that luxury anymore. I have 5 kids, 40 acres, and a town that thinks I should sell out before winter finishes us." "Are they wrong about winter?" "Maybe. But they're wrong about me selling." Her chin came up. "Robert Bellamy built this place. He's buried on that ridge. My children were born right here in this room. I am not leaving." "No one's asking you to," Silas said. "Virgil Crane," she said, the name tasting bitter. "He owns half this valley and wants this land. Our creek is the only one that doesn't freeze solid. He's tried to buy us out 3 times. The last time, he wasn't so polite." "What did he do?" "He sent his men to pull up our fence posts, claiming 20 acres of our land was his. I took the deed to town and showed the judge. Crane backed off," she said, staring at the fire. "But men like him always come back for more." Silas thought about men like Crane. He knew the type, men who think money makes them right, men who sent him running into these mountains in the first place. "How many men does Crane have?" he asked. 8, maybe 10. "And what have you got?" "An 11-year-old with a knife and a 13-year-old with a book of recipes." "I've got a rifle, and I don't miss." "1 rifle against 10 men." "I never said it was a good plan, Mr. Thorne. I just said I'm not leaving." Silas noticed that Ezra had angled himself to hear every word. The boy was gathering information, planning his own moves. "Your son is listening," Silas said quietly. "My son is always listening." Josie stood up. "Get some sleep, Mr. Thorne. Birdie will need you before dawn." At the doorway to the back room, she stopped. You never did tell me what you're running from, she said without turning around. No, ma'am, I didn't. Well, when you're ready to tell that story, I'll be ready to listen. But don't you wait too long. Secrets out here have a way of showing up at the worst possible time. She shut the door. Silas lay there, listening to the storm and the steady breathing of the little girl he had helped save. He pulled a stack of letters from his saddlebag. They were all from his sister, Ruth, and he hadn't opened a single one in 6 years. Ezra watched him, but didn't say anything. The storm raged outside, but inside the Bellamy cabin, a quiet settled in. It was an uneasy silence, but it felt like the start of something none of them ever expected. 4 days later, the storm finally broke. Little Birdie sat up all by herself and grabbed a hold of Josie's braid. The sound Josie made, somewhere between a laugh and a sob, made everyone jump up. "She's hungry," Hattie cried out, already grabbing the pot of broth. "Mama, she's actually hungry." "I see that, honey." Josie's voice trembled, but her hands were sure as she lifted the baby. Birdie was squirming and grabbing at everything, full of life. The rattle in her chest was gone. Her eyes were clear and bright, and mad as a hornet that she'd been sick for so long. Sam ran over and hugged her leg. "She's all better, Mr. Thorne. That poster on the wall called him a coward, a man who ran from a fight. But sometimes the biggest fight is the one no one sees. And true courage ain't about standing your ground. It's about knowing what's worth running for." Down on the floor, Silas was finally sitting up against the fireplace stones. "She's doing better," he said, the color returning to his face. "Your mama, she fixed little Birdie. I just gave some advice." Hattie ladled broth into a cup. "That ain't the whole truth, and everyone in this room knows it." Her voice had lost its hard edge. Ezra, though, he just sat by the door, whittling a stick down to nothing with short, angry cuts of his knife. He'd been a watchdog since seeing that poster. But Silas saw the boy's eyes tracking his baby sister, and something complex flickered in that young face. Josie finally said, "Ezra, come hold Birdie so I can heat water. You're just making sawdust." He came, taking the baby with a rough gentleness. She grabbed his ear and pulled. Ezra's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Ow, you quit that, Bird." "Bah," she chirped. "That ain't my name." "Bah," Sam piped up. "She's saying your name, Ezra. She's just making noise." "No, she's trying. She's just too little to say the whole thing." Watching them, Silas felt a place in his chest he'd kept locked for 6 years crack open. This was the sound of family. He thought of his Sarah, who used to call him Cius because she couldn't make the L sound. Hattie came over with a fresh bandage. "Time to change that dressing. Mama says I ought to learn, since I'll be doing it after you leave." After you leave. The words were a clear line drawn in the sand. "Pull the old one off slow," Silas told her. "If it sticks, wet it first." She worked with a steady hand, peeling the bandage back to look at the wound with a doctor's interest. "It's closing up clean," she said. "Mama's stitching is good." "Your mama's got good everything," Silas replied softly. "She just don't hear it enough." Hattie started rewrapping the bandage. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on the question." "The poster says cowardice. Ezra says you ran from a fight. But when Birdie stopped breathing, you talked Mama through it, calm as a Sunday morning. Cowards don't sound like that. So either that poster's lying, or cowardice means something different than what I think." Silas was quiet a moment, feeling Josie listening from the kitchen. "The poster ain't wrong about what I did. I left my unit in the middle of a battle. That's desertion. But why?" "There were families," he said, his voice low. "Women and children trapped on the wrong side of a bridge. My commanding officer said to leave them, that the mission was more important." "And you went back for them." "I went back. Did they make it?" "Every last one. And the army punished you for it. The army needed someone to blame when the retreat went bad. A surgeon who disobeyed an order was an easy choice." "A surgeon," Hattie said, sitting back. "So you are a doctor. Mama figured as much." Dr. Finch was a good man once, I reckon, Silas said. But liquor can eat away at a man, slow-like, till there's nothing left to stand on. That's a kind way of saying he's useless. It's an honest way of saying he's hurtin'. Hattie looked at him, her eyes old for her years. You know what I think, Mr. Thorne? I think you're the kind of man who can't help but try to fix broken things. And I think that's what got you into trouble in the first place. The storm finally broke on the 5th day. Josie stood at the door, reading the sky. Trail to town should be clear by tomorrow. Good, Ezra muttered from his chair. The sooner the better. Josie turned to Silas. You're healing fast. Those stitches can come out in another week. I can take them out myself. I'm sure you can, but I put them in, so I'll take them out. It was a statement, but underneath it was an offer. A week meant staying. There's something I need to tell you, Silas said. Before that trail opens. Josie sat at the table. I've been waiting. You know about the poster. What you don't know is who I left my unit for. There was a man, Colonel James Harrison. When the Confederate line broke, Harrison panicked. He ordered a full retreat and told us to abandon the civilians by the bridge. And you disobeyed. I went back across that bridge under fire. I got 12 people, including 4 children, onto wagons and to safety. And Harrison? By the time I got back, he'd already written his report, said I deserted, said my cowardice caused the whole mess. He needed a scapegoat. Couldn't you tell your side of the story? To who? Harrison had the rank and the paperwork. I had the word of folks who scattered as soon as they were safe. There was no trial, just a warrant with a price on my head. Josie's hands were flat on the table, still as water in a bucket. And this Harrison? Last I heard, he's a congressman in Washington, building a career on a war record he made up. So the man who saved those families is on my floor with a hole in his side, while the coward who left them is playing hero. That's about the size of it. The room was quiet, but for the sound of the fire and Bertie babbling in the other room. I had a daughter, Silas said, the words spilling out. Sarah, she was 4. My wife was Catherine. After the warrant, I ran. Told myself I was protecting them by staying away. His voice went hollow. Diphtheria took them both the next winter. I was 200 miles away hiding, while my family died without a doctor. Josie's breath hitched. I could have saved them, he said. That's the thing I carry. Not the war, not the poster. I had the skill to save my own family, and I wasn't there because I was hiding from a lie. Silas, he said, meeting her eyes. My name is Silas, and I'm telling you this because you deserve the whole truth. I'm a man who let his family die because he was too busy saving himself. That's worse than anything on that poster. No, Josie's voice was sharp as a new blade. No, it isn't. You didn't let them die. A disease killed them. A crooked officer stole your life and your chance to be where you belonged. You're carrying guilt that belongs to another man, and I won't sit here and let you drown in it. Silas just stared at her. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know I watched you talk my baby back to life from this very floor. That's all the knowing I need. I know you showed my daughter how to care for frozen hands, and you never flinched when my son held a knife to you. I know you mended my dead husband's gloves just because a little girl who has not said a word in 2 years asked you to without speaking. Josie's eyes were burning. You want to tell me you are a coward? You go tell that to somebody who has not seen you in action. Nobody said a thing for a long time, Mama. Clementine was standing in the doorway. She had been listening to the whole thing. Silas could see it in how she stood so still. Josie turned. What is it, honey? Clementine walked right across the room, quiet as ever. She stopped right in front of Silas and just looked at him with those big, dark eyes. It felt like he was being weighed and measured. Then she reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a small wooden bird. It was carved with care and worn smooth from being held for years. She just placed it right in Silas's hand. She did not say a word. She did not have to. Trouble came riding up the trail on a fine horse wearing a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. Josie saw him first. Crane, she breathed the name like a curse. That was the man who wanted to own everything he saw, including her land. Silas, still mending, got to his feet. He felt the weight of the small wooden bird in his pocket, a gift from Josie's silent daughter, Clementine. It was a carving from her father, a piece of the family's heart she had trusted him with. Now the man who aimed to break that family was at their door. Josie grabbed her rifle. "Hattie, get the children to the back." Ezra, her oldest, stood his ground with a hand on his knife. He had that hard look on his face, a boy trying to be the man of the house. "Fine," Josie told him, "but you stand behind me and keep your mouth shut." Virgil Crane tipped his hat, his voice smooth as creek water. "Mrs. Bellamy, glad the storm did not get you." His eyes slid past her to Silas. "I see you have company?" Josie's voice was flat. "Just a traveler, moving on." Crane swung down from his horse. "The name is Virgil Crane. And you are?" Silas met his gaze. "Funny, I am on someone else's porch. Did not figure I needed to give my name." Crane's smile tightened. He pulled a paper from his coat. "I came to make you a generous offer. $300 for the homestead and all 40 acres. This land is not worth much without a man to work it." Josie's chin came up. "This land is not for sale, Mr. Crane." He pushed on. "Be reasonable, ma'am. You have 5 children and no husband. I am just trying to help." Josie's voice went hard as iron. "A woman in my position built this home, buried her husband on that hill, and has kept 5 children alive. I do not need your help, your money, or your opinion." The false kindness vanished from Crane's face. "The territorial surveyor is coming in the spring," he said, his voice cold. "There are questions about property lines. A woman without a lawyer might find herself at a disadvantage." He got on his horse, his eyes locking with Silas. "And be careful about the company you keep. This territory can be hard on folks who hide strangers." When they were gone, Ezra spoke, his voice tight. "He knows about the poster." Josie nodded grimly. "He will find out. Men like him make it their business to know everything." Silas knew the type. Men who use the law like a club. "I should go," he said, "before I make this worse for you." Josie turned on him, her eyes blazing. "You fixin' to run again, Silas Thorne? Your mess saved my daughter's life. Do not you dare tell me you are leaving for my sake." She took a breath. "I already had one man leave me, and he did not get a choice. You can go, but do not pretend it is to protect us." To Silas's surprise, Ezra spoke up. "She is right. If Crane finds out who you are, he will use it against all of us." "So what is the plan?" Ezra asked. Josie looked at her son, then at Silas. "The plan is we stop running. We fight." Fighting meant Josie would ride into town with the deed to her land. It meant Silas had to face his own past, and it meant Ezra had to trust the stranger with the wanted poster in his pocket. As his mother rode away, Ezra faced Silas in the barn. "She trusts you." Silas nodded. "To keep you safe, that is all." The boy kicked at the dirt. "Close enough," he muttered. "And what about us?" Silas heard the real question in the boy's voice. "What happens to my family because you are here?" He owed Ezra the straight truth. "If Crane turns me in, they will send a marshal. I will be arrested. They might charge your mother for hiding me, but it is more likely they will just use that threat to make her sell. Crane gets the land, I get a jail cell, and your family gets run off. So we lose it all." "Not if we get a move on first," Silas said. "How?" "I wrote a letter to a man I served with, Tom Morrison. He was at Willow Creek Bridge, and he saw what really happened." Silas held up the envelope. "If this letter gets to him, and if he is the man I remember, we can stop running. And if he is not, then I will be gone before Crane can use me against your mother. That is a promise. You are making a lot of promises for a wanted man. They are the only ones I have left to make." Ezra took the letter and tucked it inside his coat. "I will take it to the post office. Mama left the mule for me. Your mother told me to keep you right here. My mother told you to keep us safe. and getting that letter mailed is the safest thing I can do for this family." The boy pulled on his father's mended gloves, the ones Silas had stitched by the fire, and walked to the barn without a backward glance. Besides, someone has got to ride to town sooner or later. Might as well be the one who knows every last trail between here and Elhorn Creek. Silas watched him go, feeling a quiet shift between them. It was not trust, not yet, but it was a start. Inside the cabin, Hattie moved with a quiet purpose, keeping things running. She read from her mother's recipe journal as she worked, her voice filling the small room. "Mama Crawford says the best bread comes from patience and warm hands," Hattie read while stirring a pot. "She says you cannot rush the risin' any more than you can rush healin'. Both take just as long as they need to." "Smart woman," Silas said, "the smartest. Papa always said she should have been a doctor. Maybe she was just a different kind." Hattie turned to face him. "I heard what you told Mama last night, about your daughter and your wife." "Sarah," he said. "Sarah Catherine Thorne. She had her mother's eyes and my own stubborn streak. And you believe if you had been there, you could have saved them. I know I could have. Diphtheria can be treated if you catch it early. Steam, fluids, the same things we did for Birdie." His voice got low. "I had the knowledge. I just was not in the room." Hattie was quiet for a moment. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady, just like Josie's. "Papa was in the room when the tree fell. He was standing 10 feet away. All the knowledge in the world would not have saved him. Sometimes the thing that gets you does not care what you know. You carry your guilt because you think you had a choice. But guilt is a hungry thing, Mr. Thorne. If you feed it for too long, it will eat up everything else." Just then Sam busted through the door, wrangling a chicken. "Hattie, Margaret got out again. Samuel Robert Bellamy, stop naming those chickens. She knows her name. Watch, Margaret!" The chicken squawked, and Sam held on tight. His face lit up with the pure joy of a 6-year-old boy battling a bird. "See? She answered. She is trying to get away from you," Silas chuckled. "That is just how chickens say hello." The sound of his own laugh surprised him. He could not remember the last time he had really laughed like that. "See, Mr. Silas thinks it is funny. Mr. Silas thinks you're going to lose a finger," he said. "Now put her back." As Sam hauled the hen away, Clementine crossed the room and sat near Silas. She held her father's little wooden bird and a piece of charcoal. On the hearthstone she started to draw: a cabin, a horse, and 5 small people in a row. Then she added a 6th figure, taller than the rest, drawn with the same care she gave the others. Silas watched her, saying nothing. Some things just do not need words. Josie got back from town with a face like a closed fist. She swung down from her horse, handed the reins to Hattie, and marched right past Silas into the cabin. He gave her 5 minutes, then he followed her inside. What happened? Crane already went to the judge. He filed a challenge to our property lines. He says he has a surveyor coming from Helena in 2 weeks. She stared into her coffee. He has also been talking, telling folks I have a drifter living in my cabin, a strange man around my children. Agnes Whitfield told me half the town thinks I have lost my mind. What did Agnes say? That a respectable widow does not invite strange men to sleep under her roof, and that if I cannot manage this place on my own, the Christian thing to do would be to find my children a proper home with a proper family. Josie's jaw was tight. A proper family, like the one they have, is not good enough just because it is missing a father. Crane is poisoning the well, Silas said. He is turning the town against you before the fight even starts. And it is working. I saw it in their faces. Folks who have known me for years looked at me like I had done something to be ashamed of. You saved your daughter's life. I let a stranger into my house. For a woman alone out here, that is enough. The back door opened and Ezra came in, stomping snow from his boots. He went straight to his mother. The letter is sent. And I heard things in town. What kind of things? Crane's deputy, a fella named Wyatt Polk, was in the saloon talking loud about a reward for a deserter. Said he heard one might be hiding out in this valley. Josie looked hard at Silas. He knows. He suspects, Silas corrected, but that will not last long. We are running out of time. Josie started pacing the floor. The surveyor will not be here for 2 weeks. If we can hold Crane off, we can challenge his claim, but we need the original survey papers, the ones Robert filed. Where are they? The records office in Helena. Robert filed them himself back in 1871, but Helena is a 4-day ride in good weather. This time of year, I will go. Josie stopped her pacing. You will go? The man with a bounty on his head is going to ride 4 days through the mountains in winter? I am the only one who can. You cannot leave the children. Ezra is too young for that ride, and those papers are the only thing that proves Crane is a liar. If someone recognizes you, then I will handle it. Right now, your land is more important than my freedom. Do not say that. Do not you dare put yourself below a piece of dirt. It is not about the dirt, Josie. It is about your children having a home. It is about Birdie growing up where her father built something. He stepped closer to her. For 6 years, I have protected nothing but myself. Let me protect something that matters. The cabin fell silent. Hattie stood in the doorway, holding Birdie, listening. Ezra just leaned against the wall, his face set. The morning Silas was to leave, Josie handed him a bundle. You come back, she said. That is the price of going. He looked at her. I will keep this promise. The goodbyes were quiet. Hattie nodded from the kitchen. Sam hugged his leg. As Silas passed the fireplace, Clementine pushed a folded piece of paper into his hand. A mile down the trail, he finally opened it. It was a drawing of 6 people and a cabin. Underneath, in a child's shaky hand, were 2 words she had not spoken in years. Come home. He tucked the paper safely in his pocket and rode on. He rode toward Helena with a fire in his heart, a feeling he thought had been buried with his wife and child. From the barn, Ezra kept watch until the rider was just a speck on the horizon. He then went inside, threw the bolt on the door, and sat in his chair, knife resting on his lap. But this time the blade was aimed at the door, not at the empty spot where Silas had slept. 3 long days crawled by. Josie kept the homestead running on pure grit and the refusal to quit. She milked their cow, scattered feed for the chickens, and took up the axe when Ezra's hands were too torn up to hold it. Every night, she sat with a rifle, her eyes scanning the trail for any sign of trouble. On the 4th morning, Crane returned. He wasn't alone. 4 other men rode with him. They fanned out as they approached the cabin, a practiced move to cover all sides. Crane swung off his horse and stepped onto the porch, a piece of paper in his hand. Mrs. Bellamy, this here is a court order from Judge Pwitt. It is a temporary injunction. It means you cannot use the disputed acreage until the surveyor has a look. You cannot work it, plant on it, graze it, or get water from the 20 acres in question. Josie accepted the document. Her hands were steady, but Ezra saw the tight clench of her jaw. Mr. Crane, those 20 acres you are talking about hold our only source of water. You are fully aware of that. I am aware that the law is the law, ma'am. And right now the law says that land is in dispute. The law says whatever you pay that judge to make it say. Crane's face did not change one bit. You ought to be careful, Mrs. Bellamy. Accusing a judge is a mighty serious thing. Almost as serious as hiding a fugitive from the army. Those words hit like a physical blow. Josie felt Ezra stiffen behind her, his hand finding the door frame. He was getting ready to act the way he always did. Too fast, too angry, and far too young. I have no idea what you're talking about, Josie said. I believe you do. My man Wyatt has been talking with the territorial marshal. Seems there is a $500 reward for a man named Silas Thorne, an army deserter. Crane peered past her. He would not still be around here, would he? There is no one here but me and my children. Is that right? Crane gave a nod to his deputy. Wyatt, why don't you go take a look for yourself? You will not set foot in my house. Ma'am, I have a deputy here with a badge and a good reason to think you are hiding a wanted man. The law says he can search. Ezra stepped out from his mother's side. "And I have a rifle that says he cannot." The yard fell silent. The boy stood there, his father's hunting rifle aimed squarely at Wyatt's chest. His hands did not tremble. His face had the hard calm of someone who had already made his peace with dying right there. "Ezra," his mother whispered, "put it down." "No, Mama." "Ezra James, they are not coming in this house. They will not take our water, and they will not touch a single thing Papa built." The rifle held steady. "I am 11 years old. I have been the man of this house for 2 years, and I am tired of folks taking what is ours." Crane raised a calming hand to his men. "Son, you do not want to do this. I am not your son, and you do not know a thing about what I want. Ezra." Josie's voice became low and fierce, a tone only her children knew. "Lower that rifle this instant. Not because they are right, but because you are better than them. Your father did not raise a boy who shoots men on his own porch. He raised a boy who finds a better way." The rifle stayed put. Ezra's breath was ragged, his eyes filled with a mix of anger, fear, and the desperate urge to protect his family. "There is another way," Josie insisted. "There is always another way. You have to trust me." Slowly, 1 inch at a time, Ezra brought the rifle down. His body was shaking from the strain of backing down when all he wanted to do was fight. Crane managed a smirk. "Smart boy. Now, Mrs. Bellamy, about that search. That will not be necessary." A new voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned to see a rider approaching at a calm pace. He sat tall in the saddle, and his clothes suggested he was a man of some importance. Behind him, a younger man carried an official-looking leather case. "I am Thomas Harding," the man said as he dismounted. "I am an attorney at law, and I was retained by Mrs. Josephine Bellamy. The request was filed in my Helena office 3 days ago." Josie just stared. She had not hired any lawyer. "Mr. Crane, I have looked over the injunction you are trying to serve. I am ready to challenge it. The original survey documents, which my associate here got from the Territorial Records Office yesterday, clearly show Mrs. Bellamy's property lines as filed by her late husband in 1871. There is no dispute, there never was one. Any more attempts to claim this land will be met with a countersuit. We will sue you for harassment, fraud, and abusing the law." Crane's face turned pale as a ghost. "Who hired you? Who my client is my business. What is not a secret is this." Harding produced another document. "This is a formal complaint filed with the territorial governor about Judge Pwitt issuing this injunction without even looking at the existing records. The governor does not take kindly to judges who sign things they have not read, Mr. Crane. Neither does the federal government." The deputy slowly moved his hand away from his gun. Crane's men started looking at each other. The whole situation had changed, and everyone knew it. "This is not over," Crane growled. "Actually, Mr. Crane, it is." Harding folded his arms. "Now, I suggest you and your men get off Mrs. Bellamy's land before I add trespassing to that complaint." Crane got back on his horse. He gave Josie a look that promised he would be back, that powerful men like him did not lose. But he rode away. As his men followed, the sound of their horses faded, leaving only the sound of the wind. It felt like the world was closing in on Josie Bellamy. Her son, Ezra, was holding a rifle on men sent to take their home, all because a rich man wanted their water. It's a hard truth that sometimes the most decent folks get dealt the worst hands. But this story is about what happens when a stranger, a wanted man no less, decides to do the right thing. It's about how one act of kindness can change everything. A lawyer Josie had never seen before showed up at her door. He said a man named Silas Thorne, half frozen and bleeding, had sent him. The lawyer handed her an envelope. Later that night, in the quiet of the cabin, she read the 3 short lines he had written. The legal papers were real. The lawyer was paid for, and he was coming back. Ezra watched her with eyes that were too old for his years. "Is he really coming back, Mama?" Josie looked at her fierce, stubborn son, who had stood ready to defend them all. "He says he is. Do you believe him?" She thought about the man who'd repaired her husband's gloves and calmed her daughter's fever. "I do," she said, and meant it. Ezra gave a single nod. He pulled his father's mended gloves from his coat and set them on the table, right where the stranger would find them when he returned. Outside, for the first time in what felt like forever, the Montana sky was full of stars. And somewhere on a cold trail, a man who had been running from his past for 6 long years was finally riding toward a future. Silas was 4 days late. He finally rode in on the 8th day, looking like he'd been through a grinder. He moved slow, favoring his side, but he was here. When he looked at Josie across the snowy yard, his eyes held a kind of peace she had not seen before. "You're late," she said, her voice steady. "Got delayed," he answered. 4 days delayed sounds like trouble. He tied up his horse and pulled a thick leather folder from a saddlebag. "The kind of trouble that ends with a congressman finally facing the music. My old sergeant, Tom Morrison, he had it all. He'd been holding on to the truth of what happened at Willow Creek for 12 years, just waiting for someone to ask." Silas's hand trembled just a bit as he held out the folder. "It's all in here, Josie. Everything I need to clear my name." Before he could even step inside, 6-year-old Sam launched himself at the man's knees. "You came back, you promised, and I told him you would." Hattie was smiling from the kitchen, a real, genuine smile that made her look like a young girl again instead of a child carrying the weight of the world. "I don't live here," Silas started to say gently, setting Sam down. "If you say passing through, I'll hit you with this spoon," Josie warned him. Baby Birdie, playing by the fire, looked up and held out her arms right to him. Ezra stood from his chair by the door. His knife was on the table, not in his hands. He just gave Silas a nod. "Thanks for getting that letter sent," Silas told the boy. "Made all the difference." Ezra just shrugged. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for Mama." "I know," Silas said quietly. "That's why it matters." Just then, Josie walked right up to Silas. She didn't say a word, just put her hands on his chest and kissed him. It was not a kiss of desperation, but a slow, sure kiss that said, "You are home." From the loft above, a loud whisper broke the quiet. "Hattie, are they kissing?" "Sam, shut your eyes." Silas and Josie both laughed, and the whole cabin seemed to breathe out a sigh of relief. "I carried it with me the whole way," Silas said softly. "Right here next to my heart." Clem took her drawing and pinned it to the wall by her daddy's Bible, a spot where anyone in the cabin could see it. Then she went to her place by the window, pressing her hand flat against the cold glass. That evening, once the children were asleep, Josie sat with him and read through all of Morrison's evidence. "This is more than enough," she finally said. Silas nodded. "Morrison thinks so, too. He's already got a federal judge in Cheyenne, a man named Worthington with a reputation for being square. He's agreed to look at the case himself." He paused. "That's what took me so long. Harrison's people know something is up. 2 hired guns picked up my trail outside of Helena. Same kind of men Crane pays to do his dirty work." Josie's face hardened. "They found you?" "They found me," Silas confirmed. "But I lost them in the mountain passes." "Josie, this connects everything. Crane's deputy Wyatt." "Deputy? Polk, he served under Harrison in the war. They ain't 2 separate problems. Crane is just doing Harrison's bidding in this valley, grabbing land and power for whatever Harrison is cooking up next. Your homestead just got in their way." "Robert's homestead," she corrected, his name catching in her throat like it always did. "He chose this land for the water. He always said whoever holds the creek holds the valley. Crane knew it too. Your husband was a smart man." "My husband was a good man," she countered. "There's a difference. Smart men look out for themselves. Good men look out for everyone else." She looked straight at him. "You remind me of him that way. It's the part about you I like the least, because it's dangerous. It's what gets a man killed." She reached out and her hand rested on his. It was the first time she'd touched him just to touch him. "Don't you get killed, Silas. These children can't stand to lose another soul. I'm not planning on it. Robert wasn't either, she whispered. He turned his hand over, his fingers closing around hers. I'm not Robert. I spent 6 years learning to survive things that should have put me in the ground. And now, I have something to come back for. Josie didn't pull away. They just sat there in the quiet lamplight with 5 sleeping children and the big Montana winter pressing on the walls, trying to find a way in, and failing. 12 days later, on a morning so cold the air felt brittle, the reckoning arrived. Josie was hanging laundry when Ezra flew through the door, his face pale and his breath coming in ragged bursts. "Riders, Mama. 8 of 'em, coming up the trail fast." Before the boy could finish, Silas was already on his feet. "It's Crane," Ezra said. "Crane's out front with Polk and a bunch of men I don't know. They're all armed." Josie didn't waste a second. "Hattie, get the children to the root cellar. Now." "Mama, I'm not hiding," Hattie declared. "Hattie, May, you take your brothers and sisters and you stay down there until I come for you. You hear me?" Hattie heard. She gathered a suddenly quiet Sam and picked up a fussing Birdie, but Clementine wouldn't move. "Clem, we have to go," Hattie pleaded. Clementine just stood at the window, her hand flat against the glass, watching the riders get closer. "Clem?" The little girl turned to look at Silas. Then she walked to the shelf, took down her father's little carved bird, and put it in Hattie's hand. She pointed to the cellar, then to herself, and shook her head firmly. "She wants to stay," Hattie said, her voice trembling. "Absolutely not," Josie snapped. Clementine looked right at her mother, her eyes deep and serious. She held up both hands, all 10 fingers spread. 10. She pointed at Josie. 1, then Silas. 2, then Ezra. 3, and finally, herself. 4. "She's counting fighters," Ezra said, his voice husky. "She's only 8 years old, but she's right. We need every hand." Josie shut her eyes for a heartbeat. When she opened them, she was still a mother, but she was also the woman who had kept 5 children alive against all odds. "All right, Clem, you take the back window. You watch, and you do not move. Ezra, you're with me on the porch. Silas, I'll be where I need to be." Crane rode up like a man who figured he had the whole thing won already. Polk was on one side, and on the other was a man Silas remembered from the trail, one of the hired guns who'd chased him through the mountains. Behind them, 5 more men fanned out like they'd done this 100 times before. "Mrs. Bellamy," Crane shouted, "I have a warrant from the territorial marshal to search your home for a wanted man. Step on aside and no one will get hurt." "Let me see that warrant," Josie demanded. Crane waved a piece of paper. "Signed by Judge Pwitt this very morning." "Pwitt's warrants ain't worth the ink on 'em, and you know it," Josie shot back from the porch. "That pet judge of yours is already being investigated. Any paper he signs is worthless." "That's for the lawyers to figure out," Crane sneered. "Right now I've got a legal paper and 8 guns. You've just got a porch." "She's also got me." Silas stepped out from the cabin to stand beside her. "I'm the man you're looking for. You can drop the act." Crane's gaze locked onto him. "Silas Thorne, deserter, $500 on your head." "Surgeon," Silas corrected him. "And a soldier who saved 12 people while your friend Harrison was running from the fight." He held up the leather folder from Morrison. "And I've got the proof." The yard fell silent. Polk's hand twitched toward his pistol as Crane's men shifted uneasily in their saddles. "Whatever you've got in there doesn't change the warrant." "Polk, go get him," Crane ordered. As Polk swung off his horse, Ezra stepped up, rifle ready. "I wouldn't do that," the boy said, his voice steady. "Son, you best put that down." Josie laid a hand on the rifle, not to lower it, but to steady him. Then a sound from the cabin froze everyone. A voice, thin and sharp from 2 years of not being used, shattered the quiet. "They're coming!" It was Clementine. "Mama, there are more riders coming from the north." Josie rushed to the back window while Silas peered around the cabin. A cloud of dust and snow was rising from the trail, and through it rode not 8, but at least 15 riders. Crane saw them, and the smirk fell right off his face. The rider in the lead broke away and came straight for them. It was Agnes Whitfield, who ran the town's only diner, riding a huge draft horse like she was born to it. Behind her were the faces Josie knew well, shopkeepers, ranchers, and the town blacksmith. These were the same folks who had looked the other way while Crane was putting the squeeze on the valley. "Morning, Virgil," Agnes called out, her voice carrying an authority that made Crane's arrival look cheap. "Heard you were headed to the Bellamy place. Figured you could use some company." "This is official business, Agnes," Crane snapped. "It does not concern you." "Everything in this valley concerns me," she said flatly. Her eyes met Josie's, and in that look was an apology for all the weeks of gossip. "I also had a visitor yesterday, a federal judge named Worthington. He had some mighty interesting things to say about you, Virgil, about land fraud and a 12-year plot to ruin the man standing right there on that porch." The color drained from Crane's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then you will not mind waiting. Judge Worthington is about an hour behind us," Agnes said with a cold smile. "We took the shortcut. We did not want to miss the fun." That hour was the longest of Crane's life. He tried to leave twice, but the townspeople quietly blocked his path. Their courage had returned now that they were all together. Polk gave up his badge without a fuss after Garrett, the blacksmith who stood 6'4" and weighed 250 pounds, suggested it was the healthier choice. The hired guns just vanished into the hills like they always do when the fight is no longer fixed. Judge Worthington arrived on a gray mare, calm and dignified. With him was Tom Morrison, carrying a leather case full of papers and looking like a man who'd just laid down a heavy burden after more than a decade. "Silas," Morrison said, getting off his horse. The two men looked at each other across 12 years of silence and guilt. "I should have said something sooner," Morrison confessed. "You are speaking now," Silas replied. "That is what matters." Judge Worthington held his court right there in the yard. He reviewed Morrison's evidence and took statements from Silas and even a couple of Crane's men, who suddenly found their voices. He compared the real property deeds with Crane's forgeries. By the middle of the afternoon, the whole thing was settled. Crane and Polk were in custody. Silas Thorne's name, which had meant coward for 12 long years, was finally cleared. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, folding his papers carefully, "on behalf of the court, I owe you an apology. What happened to you was wrong, and the men responsible will pay for it." "Thank you, Your Honor." "Do not thank me. Thank that woman," the judge said, nodding toward Josie with real admiration. "She is the one who kept you alive to see this day." After the judge was done, Agnes Whitfield came up to Josie on the porch. The older woman seemed smaller now and humbled. "I said some things in town, Josie," Agnes began. "Things about you and the children that were not fair and not true." "No, they were not," Josie said quietly. "I am sorry, Josie. My Robert would have been ashamed of me." "Robert would have said that folks make mistakes, and the ones who admit it are worth keeping," Josie replied. She then added, "He also would have said your chicken and dumplings cover a multitude of sins." Agnes let out a surprised laugh and pulled Josie into a warm hug. As the sun set, the townspeople rode away, their voices filled with the warmth of people who had done a good thing together. Morrison stayed for supper, and after 2 bowls of stew, he declared it the best meal he had ever had. After he left, the cabin fell into a new kind of quiet. It was not the tense silence of a family in danger, but the deep, peaceful quiet of people who had come through a storm and found the other side. Bertie and Sam were sound asleep, worn out by all the excitement. Hattie was reading by the lamplight, and Clementine was at the table drawing on a clean sheet of paper. Ezra stood by the door, his rifle back on its rack. He looked at Silas. "I owe you an apology," the boy said, his voice low. "I treated you like a criminal from the moment I saw that poster. I watched you every night, just waiting for you to prove me right." You were just protecting your family, Silas said. That is never something to be sorry for. Maybe, Ezra admitted, but I was also scared. I was scared that if I trusted you and I was wrong, it would break this family in a way I could not fix. The way Papa dying broke something. You are not my Papa, Ezra said quickly. I do not want you to be. But we need someone. I need someone. The boy's voice trembled. I am 11 years old, Mr. Thorne, and I have been acting like I am 40. I am so tired I can barely stand it. Silas crossed the room and knelt so he was eye to eye with the boy. You have done a man's job, Ezra. A better job than most men could do. But you are still a boy, and a boy deserves to sleep without worry. So here is my offer. I will watch the door. You sleep, and if anything happens, I will wake you up. We will face it together. Not because you cannot handle it alone, but because you should not have to. Ezra did not cry, but he leaned forward and rested his head on Silas's shoulder for just a moment. He pulled back and wiped his face. Deal, Ezra whispered. Deal, Silas confirmed. From the kitchen doorway, Josie watched them. She did not say a word. Some things are best left uninterrupted. Between a man and a boy were special, and she knew she'd just seen something as close to sacred as anything that cabin would ever hold. Later that night, after all the children were finally asleep, Josie and Silas sat at the table in the low light of the lamp. Ruth wrote you back, Josie said, nodding to the letters he'd finally set on the shelf. I saw the new envelope that came with Morrison. Silas reached out and touched it. She wants me to come home. Says to bring the whole family. Says Ohio has good farmland and her kids need their uncle. What did you tell her? I told her I found something here in Montana I wasn't ready to leave, he said, looking at her. Something, or someone's. Josie reached for his hand, her grip deliberate and sure. Robert's been gone 2 years, she said, and for 2 years I've been proving I could do it all alone. Proving I was enough for 5 children and 40 acres in a world that thinks a widow is worthless. You are enough, Josie. You always have been. I know, she said. But being enough isn't the same as being whole. She squeezed his hand. You once asked if my children were safe with you. Now I have to ask you something harder. Are you safe with us? Because these children, Silas, they will love you with everything they have. They're already halfway there. And if you leave, I'm not leaving. Let me finish, she said. If you leave, it won't just break their hearts. It'll break mine. And I have spent 2 long years making sure nothing could hurt me again. So if you stay for good. Not just passing through. For real. Josie Bellamy, he said, his voice low and steady. I rode for 8 days through a blizzard with a hole in my side just to get a lawyer to your door. I let your boy hold a knife on me for a week. I have slept on your floor and bled on your floor. I have been yours since the night you stitched me up while standing barefoot in the snow. The only reason I haven't said it out loud is because I was waiting for you to believe you deserved to hear it. She stood up, walked around the table and cupped his face in her hands, looking at him with that steady, fearless way she had. Then stay. Yes, ma'am. Spring came to the mountains all at once, loud and full of life. The creek roared, the ground softened, and Bertie took her first steps right into Silas's arms. The family worked together in a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Ezra split wood and slept peacefully for the first time in 2 years, knowing the man in the chair by the door was keeping watch. The news about what happened at Willow Creek Bridge spread like wildfire. The powerful man who framed Silas was stripped of his position and faced a military trial. Silas Thorne's name was finally cleared. He was not a deserter, but a hero who had been paying for another man's cowardice. Letters from his sister Ruth arrived every week, filled with plans to bring her family out for the summer. One evening in late May, Josie found Silas on the ridge behind the cabin, standing by the spot where her husband Robert was buried. He was not restless or looking over his shoulder. He just stood there, holding his hat in his hands, finally at peace. He was a man who had stopped running, a man who had found his way home model. He was speaking low to the wooden cross when Josie walked up. He heard her boots on the dirt and looked back. "Just introducing myself," he told her. Felt like I owed him that much. She came and stood right there with him. "What did you say?" "I told him I'd look after everything he built," Silas said. "That his children are strong and brave, and stubborn as all get out, just like their mother. And that I wasn't trying to replace him, just trying to be worthy of what he started here." Josie slid her hand right into his. "He would have liked you." "You think so?" "I think he'd have told you that you talk too much, you ride too slow, and your coffee's strong enough to peel paint." She gave his fingers a squeeze. "Then he would have shook your hand and said, 'Welcome home.'" Down below them, the homestead glowed in the evening light. Smoke rose from the cabin chimney, and through an open window came the sounds of their life now. Hattie singing as she cooked, a spoon banging on the table, and Clementine's voice still finding its strength, reading from her mother's recipe book to anyone who'd listen. Josie leaned her head on Silas's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. They stood there on the ridge where Robert Bellamy rested, watching the sun dip low behind the mountains. Some moments are just too full for words, and this was one of them. The truth of it all was simple, even if the path to get there had been hard. A man fell from his horse in a blizzard. A woman made the choice to pull him inside instead of leaving him to the snow. 5 children, each in their own way, decided to let a stranger become part of their family. And this homestead, which had been held together by one woman's refusal to give up, became something more. It became a place where broken people could put each other back together, where silence finally learned how to speak again. Love wasn't about big promises here. It was in the stitches sewn by lamplight and the bread shared at a table built by hands that were gone, but never forgotten. Silas Thorne stopped running from his past the night Josie Bellamy opened her door. And Josie Bellamy stopped carrying the world on her own shoulders the night she let him in. That was the whole story. That was enough.